And for a deeper assessment of what the budget amounts to, we brought together the General Secretary of the Scottish Trades Union Congress, Foyer, the Chief Executive of the Business Network, Prosper, Sara Thiam, and the political commentator, Bernard Ponsonby. So let's have a brief reaction from all of you before we dig down into the details of this budget. Rose, what did you make of the budget?
Well, it was a budget delivered by a woman Chancellor, which was great, and it started to do the sort of things that we need a Labour government to start to do. So £70 billion worth of investment in our infrastructure, in our economy. That's got to be a good start.
Okay, Sarah.
It's been a long time coming, and there's been so much speculation and such a lot of uncertainty in recent months that I think that's really impacted on investment. So let's get on with it. Let's focus on growth. Let's deal with, some of it good, some of it bad, and let's really get focused on growing the economy, because that's what we want to be delivering, the income that will cover help pay for public services.
Okay, Bernard.
Well, a lot of people have asked the question, is this new Labour government, new Labour Mark II? On the basis of today, emphatically not. Higher tax rises, higher spending, higher borrowing. This is a budget that could have been delivered by Dennis Healey when Jim Callaghan was Prime Minister.
Well, let's get to the tax rises, because £25 billion raised from an increase to the employers' national insurance contributions. Now, Labour says this isn't a tax on working people, but will it not have repercussions on working people somewhere down the line?
Well, I don't think it is a tax on working people. I think that actually we needed that investment in those tax rises. So we're talking about 40 billion of tax rises across the piece. We would have liked to have seen them go further and maybe look at wealth taxes, corporation taxes. But, at the end of the day, it's about the people with the broadest shoulders, and they have brought in a whole new package of employment rights.
But don't you think the employers having to pay more in national insurance contributions is going to have effect perhaps on how many people they employ?
Well, there's a number of mitigations for smaller employers. At the end of the day, this is about taxing those, with the broadest shoulders, and there are a lot of employers out there who are making very good profits, and so we have to start to redistribute the wealth in our economy. It's not something that necessarily affects working people, and we have seen a rise in the minimum wage today, and we've also seen a new package of workers' rights that will allow workers to join trade unions and actually push for better paying conditions.
Sarah, what do you make of what Ros has said there? Because it's been quite hard on businesses.
Yes, and actually I think we do think it will impact on working people in more ways than one. So I think, first of all, it's worth saying that whilst the smallest businesses have been protected and allowances have been made, that's really, businesses under 4-5 people. Even for your average small business, 20 people, that can mean an additional £15,000 that they hadn't budgeted for. Those costs are going to need to be passed on to the consumer in prices. So it is going to impact on working people down the line, and actually impact on employers' ability to invest in other things to make their businesses more productive, or to reward their workers and so on.
And what have you made of the other tax rises?
So I think we feel that in particular there's real concern about industries in Scotland who have been disproportionately impacted. So the first of these really is oil and gas and energy. The energy profits levy is of considerable concern. I think there's real worry about immediate risks to jobs, to investment, and actually to the energy transition. So there is real potential for Scotland and the UK to lead in terms of the energy transition and energy security, but this will impact on that. And whisky is another industry, and spirits.
We'll maybe come back to that in a second, but Bernard, the biggest tax hike since 1993, what did you make of it overall, Matt?
Well, in a sense, I agree with both of the previous speakers. Does this have the capacity to create unemployment? Does it have the capacity to put some businesses over the edge in terms of maybe tourism-related businesses or hospitality? The answer is plainly yes, because these tax rises, combined with the national living wage, are very, very high additional costs. people should just be upfront. Yes, it may well put some people out of business, but the government has to take a macroeconomic decision about what the results of that taxation do. The changes to the national living wage today, over 6% for most workers, for younger workers, over 16%. This is genuinely transformative. It is genuinely the government making a statement that you cannot have an economy which is based upon low pay. And any tax and spend decisions that every government does, if it helps workers, some people will lose out. And therefore, the question is whether or not in the broader politics of the budget, the government are going in the right direction. I believe that they are going in the right direction, and the reason I say that this is an old Labour budget, I simply could not envisage that Tony Blair would have signed off on £25 billion worth of tax increases where business are effectively paying to make workers better off.
OK, and Ros, they've changed the fiscal rules to allow them to invest, to borrow more to invest, and they're also increasing day-to-day spending. What effect will that have?
Well, I agree with Bernard. I mean, this is good old-fashioned Keynesianism, and this is exactly what our economy needs after decades of Tory austerity, after them giving all the money to their pals in rich places. We need to rebalance our economy. We need to invest in the public services that ordinary people rely on, which are on their knees. And we actually need to rebuild and invest in the infrastructure that our country needs for economic growth. So yes, some difficult decisions have been made today, but we're not making these decisions for, tax giveaways to people in rich places. We're actually making them to invest in our economy, and that is vital for a just transition. It's vital for the skills pipeline that we need to be able to move forward. It's vital that businesses can rely on a country that has good public services and a healthy workforce. So all these things are really important and will create long-term sustainable economic growth. If anything, my criticism is they should have gone further.
OK, Sara, what do you think about this idea of changing the fiscal rules so they can borrow more to invest?
Well, I think there's a lot of economists think that's a very good idea, and that actually we've really tied ourselves in to chronic underinvestment, particularly in comparison with our competitors in Europe and internationally. Other countries around the world invest a great deal more in infrastructure, in public transport, in those real economic enablers that get an economy moving and going. OK,
and in terms of the Scottish budget, Shona Robertson has now been given an extra $3.4 billion to spend next year. Will this make things much easier for her then when the budget comes in December?
Well, the irony of ironies is that a Labour Chancellor has given the SNP a war chest for the elections in 2026. There's $1.5 billion, which is likely to come north this financial year. Now, it's quite important about where that is going to be spent. We can already see a very clear division line in the run-up to 2026. Two Labour MPs in the chamber today asking the Prime Minister, should all of the health consequentials that go to Scotland be spent on the health service? And you can bet your bottom dollar, if the SNP use Barnett consequentials which are meant for health to be spent in other areas or to fund other projects, Labour will be after them, and that will be a very clear dividing line at the next election. And of course, one of the things that the government have to do in Scotland is to find extra money to pay for public sector pay awards, which they signed off on. Now, I think they were right to do that. I think the government were right to recognise in a cost of living crisis you have to help workers. The Auditor General has said, but it's been done in a financially haphazard way. The government are now getting a pot of money which will take them over that short-term problem of having to pay for decisions which they've already agreed to.
Yeah, Sara, what would you like to see in the Scottish budget?
The real priorities, I think, are around infrastructure, transport, energy, housing is absolutely critical. Skills is another area that really needs to be focused on. And I think anything, whether it's income tax, whether it's about the planning regime, anything that means that we're not on a level playing field with the rest of the UK, could endanger inward investment. So those are the kind of critical areas. Grid connections as well is something that's really critical and we're hearing all the time.
Okay, Ros, what would you like?
Yeah, well, they can start by resolving the local government dispute that's still running for this year, for a start. There are a number of cuts they made that they could be looking at reversing with the 1.5. The 3.4 means that there is no longer any reason for the Westminster blame game to be played anymore. As far as I'm concerned now, the ball is firmly in the Scottish Government's court, and they need to deliver now in the Scottish budget, and that means investment in public services, it means further redistribution of wealth, and it means them showing us that you know, now they have the money, they have the powers, they actually have extra revenue raising options if they choose to do so, and they can now deliver for Scotland's workers. Okay,
we will have to leave it there. Difficult to squeeze all into such a short period of time, but you did a great job. Thank you all very much indeed for joining us this evening.
Thank you.